She was always there, always watching, but never quite a part of it. The quiet girl, blending in with the shadows, the one who spoke little and said less. It was as if she existed just outside the edge of everyone's peripheral vision, unnoticed and underestimated. But she had learned something they hadn't. Sometimes, silence is the deadliest weapon of all. If you believe in the power of unspoken strength, like and subscribe now, because the story of this quiet girl is about to change everything. There's something strange about silence when it's wrapped in stillness. It holds power, undeniable, unnoticed power. And Sierra Carson understood it better than anyone. The camp had become a cacophony of noise, from the harsh laughter of recruits during their breaks to the shouting commands of sergeants on training fields. Yet, through it all, she was a whisper in a storm, quiet, reserved, and lethal in her own way. She wasn't the loud one. She wasn't the one who cracked jokes or made waves. The rest of the soldiers didn't understand it, and they mocked her for it. She was easy to dismiss, easy to ignore, a shadow amongst the moving bodies. She'd walk through the barracks, and people would give her a sideways glance, maybe a raised brow, but that was it. No one bothered to approach. No one cared to know her story, and that suited Sierra just fine. The day started like any other. The sun had barely begun to rise, casting its first rays of light over the rugged, sun-bleached terrain of the camp. Soldiers shuffled about, huddled in groups, their voices bouncing off the walls of the mess hall. She had already finished her morning routine, had already packed her gear, and was now walking to the firing range, her sanctuary. The air was thick with chatter, with the loud clanking of trays being set down, with the rustling of bags and boots hitting the concrete. But Sierra, in her quiet grace, remained untouched by the noise. She was nothing like the others, the boisterous young soldiers who felt the need to make their presence known at every opportunity. No, Sierra Carson moved through the crowd with the kind of ease that only comes with being invisible. But that didn't mean she wasn't listening. And today, the conversation she overheard was one she would never forget. A few of the younger soldiers, their faces still flushed from their last round of training, were seated at a table near the back of the mess hall. Their voices were low, but their words carried. "You see that girl, Carson?" one of them said, leaning back in his chair and spinning his empty muck. "What does she even do here? I've never seen her speak. Not once." The others snickered, shaking their heads as if the mere idea of her was some kind of joke. "She's just a ghost," another soldier added, his voice dripping with contempt. "She probably just followed someone here. A rich girl who doesn't know what hard work is. She's got that sniper rifle, though," the third soldier piped up. "Guess she thinks she's all that, hiding behind that gun of hers. But she can't even hold a conversation with anyone without looking like she's about to pass out." They all laughed then, loud and raucous, their mocking tones cutting through the hum of the cafeteria. They didn't know Sierra was listening. They didn't care. To them, she was just a puzzle piece that didn't fit, out of place and irrelevant. But Sierra didn't flinch. She didn't react. Her face remained a mask of calm, even as their words stung her with the precision of a bullet. She had learned long ago not to let their ignorance bother her. They could mock her all they wanted. She was used to it. The quiet girl, the one who never spoke up, the one who didn't fit their idea of what a soldier should be. And yet, what they didn't know was that Sierra wasn't here to fit anyone's mold. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to do one thing, and one thing only: survive. There was a part of her that had grown tired of the jokes, of being the subject of whispered conversations and sideways glances. They didn't see her for who she really was. They didn't understand the depth of her skill, the training that had shaped her into the woman she was today, the kind of training that had honed her into one of the deadliest snipers in the military. But she wasn't here to boast. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone. The rifle she carried, the M40A5, was her companion, her tool of precision, her weapon of choice. The only approval she needed was from herself. The more they mocked her, the more she withdrew into her world, a world where the hum of bullets, the wind over her shoulder, and the crosshairs of her scope were all that mattered. It didn't bother her. It didn't make her angry. It just made her quieter, stronger, more determined. And while they laughed, they didn't see the quiet storm building inside of her. They didn't see the fierce determination burning behind her calm exterior. They didn't understand that Sierra wasn't just another soldier. She was a weapon, trained to take down enemies one by one. without ever having to raise her voice. In her silence, there was a power they couldn't comprehend. In her stillness, there was a focus they couldn't match. As the days passed, their mocking words continued to echo in her ears. But rather than break her, they solidified something deeper within her, a resolve to prove that strength didn't come from the loudest voice or the biggest presence in the room. Strength came from knowing who you were and being content with it. Strength came from being the one who watched, the one who waited, the one who never needed to say a word. Sierra knew her time would come. When it did, the quiet girl, the one they had dismissed, would become the one they feared. And in the end, it would be her silence, her unwavering focus, that would silence them all. The mission briefing came just a few days after the last round of mockery in the mess hall. The camp buzzed with activity as usual, soldiers coming and going with a sense of urgency, preparing for their next deployment. But for Sierra Carson, the mission meant something different. It wasn't about proving herself to anyone. It wasn't about the snide comments or the dismissive glances. It was about precision, focus, and survival. Her platoon had been called in for a high-risk operation. A rogue faction had seized a strategic location, and it was up to them to neutralize the threat. The plan was simple on paper: move quickly, eliminate the enemy, and regain control of the area. But Sierra knew better. Nothing about this would be simple, and the rest of her unit had no idea what was coming. In the briefing room, the usual sounds of discussion quieted when the orders were issued. Sierra remained seated at the back of the room, her gaze steady, taking in every detail. As the rest of the platoon muttered amongst themselves, trying to figure out the best way to execute the mission, Sierra sat motionless. Her mind was already several steps ahead of everyone else. She could feel the tension building. The camp's bustling energy, the sound of boots echoing on the concrete floors, the low hum of distant machinery, it all faded into the background. This was what she was trained for: operating in silence, working unseen, and striking when no one expected it. Her team was assigned to infiltrate the compound undetected, a task that would require precision and careful timing. There was a moment of confusion when Sierra's name was called. "Carson, you're on Overwatch. You'll be setting up on the ridge, covering the team's movement. Your primary objective is to eliminate any hostiles before they spot you." It wasn't a surprise. She had done this before, countless times. But she could feel the skeptical eyes of her teammates on her. A quiet girl with a sniper rifle? It was as if they didn't know what to make of her. Still, Sierra didn't flinch. She stood, gathered her gear, and walked out of the briefing room without a word. The rest of the platoon remained in their heated discussions, no one truly understanding the weight of what was about to unfold. Hours later, the team gathered at the base of the ridge. The sun had begun to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the rocky terrain. Sierra, already perched in her position, adjusted her rifle with meticulous care. The M40A5 was a perfect extension of herself, its weight and precision familiar. She clicked the safety off and dialed in the wind speed, the elevation, and the distance to her first target. The world around her narrowed to a single point, the view through her scope. The others fumbled with their gear as they prepared to move in, unaware of what was happening above them. Sierra's breath slowed, steady and controlled. The first wave of enemy patrols was on the move, and Sierra's job was to clear them without alerting the others. A single shot, one bullet, one life extinguished. That was all it would take. She had done this more times than she could count. Her finger hovered over the trigger as she sighted in on the first guard. He was moving, his head turned away, blissfully unaware of the deadly presence watching him from above. One shot was all it would take. A breath, a squeeze, and then the unmistakable crack of a bullet cutting through the air. The guard collapsed without a sound, the body crumpling silently to the ground. Sierra's heart didn't race. Her hands didn't tremble. She adjusted her scope, waiting for the next target to cross her line of sight. The rest of the team continued to move toward the compound, unaware of how quickly their fate was being decided. One by one, she picked them off, each shot precise, each kill deliberate. The first guard was followed by another, then another. Sierra moved with methodical precision, her focus unwavering. The M40A5 had no mercy. Neither did she. From her vantage point, Sierra could see the entire battlefield laid out before her. Her shots were the calm before the storm. While the rest of the unit fought their way forward, taking fire and returning it, Sierra's role remained unseen. She was a shadow, a ghost, eliminating threats with surgical precision. Each bullet she sent out was a death sentence to an enemy soldier, and each of them fell without ever knowing who had struck them down. By the time her team had breached the compound, Sierra had cleared the path. 20 enemies, all eliminated with a single shot each. She had moved like a whisper in the wind, leaving behind no trace but the bodies of those who had underestimated her. The mission was a success. The team had regained control of the area, but as they returned to camp, there was no applause, no recognition. They had no idea who had truly made the difference. Back at base, as the platoon gathered in the mess hall to decompress, Sierra sat alone, her food untouched. The laughter and conversation flowed freely around her, but she remained in her silence. The mocking, the doubts, all of it seemed distant now. She didn't need anyone's recognition. She had done her job, and in the end, that was all that mattered. The team would never know how close they had come to failure. They would never know that the quiet girl with the sniper rifle had saved them all. And Sierra, as always, would remain a shadow, moving through the world unnoticed, until the next time her silence would speak louder than words. The days that followed the mission were quiet, but there was a change in the air. Sierra could feel it in the way her platoon members began to look at her, differently, as if they were seeing her for the first time. The whispers that had once been directed at her behind closed doors had grown silent. They didn't mock her anymore. Instead, there was an uncomfortable respect that hung in the air, a respect she had earned without saying a word. But Sierra didn't care for the change. She had done her job, and that was enough. Her mind was already on the next task. There was no time for congratulations or idle chatter. It wasn't until the after-action report that the true weight of the mission hit the platoon. The higher-ups reviewed the operation, poring over the intel and the outcomes. They quickly realized that the compound had been secured with far fewer casualties than expected. They had anticipated a much higher risk, more intense firefights, and significant losses. But thanks to the precision of Sierra's shots, the enemy had been systematically taken down without ever knowing what hit them. The casualty reports were astonishingly light for such a high-risk mission. The brass quickly pieced it together, but they had no idea how close they had come to failure without Sierra's unseen contribution. It was during a debriefing, a few days after the mission, that the truth started to surface. The team had gathered to review the details of their success, the enemy tactics, and how they could improve for future operations. But as they sat in the sterile conference room, a senior officer walked in with a printed report in his hand. The platoon went quiet. The officer's gaze fell on Sierra for a moment before he began to speak. "Your performance on the mission," the officer began, his voice carrying authority, "has been reviewed. And the success of this operation is due, in no small part, to the precise work done by Sergeant Carson." There was a moment of stunned silence before whispers rippled through the room. Sierra's name? Acknowledged? By the higher-ups? It was a shock to everyone. Even Sierra herself was taken aback. She had never been one to seek recognition, but hearing it now, in this context, made her realize just how much she had truly contributed. The others, still processing the announcement, exchanged glances. Their previous judgment of her, of the quiet girl who barely spoke, was crumbling. They had no idea what she was capable of, not until they saw the results of her work firsthand. The officer continued, detailing how Sierra had eliminated 20 enemy soldiers without a single shot being wasted, how her actions had created a clear path for the team to secure the compound with minimal resistance. "Your precision," the officer said, "saved lives. Your ability to remain calm under pressure, to stay out of sight, to make every shot count. It is exactly the kind of discipline and skill we need on this team." The entire room fell into a stunned silence. Sierra remained seated, her expression neutral, but inside, something shifted. The mockery, the doubts, the dismissals, they didn't matter anymore. She hadn't needed to fight for their approval, but now, she realized that they had seen her for who she really was. They saw the sniper, the soldier, the calm, deadly force that had kept them safe when the mission could have easily gone south. Later that evening, when the team gathered for dinner, there was no loud celebration, no cheers of victory. Instead, the atmosphere was heavy with a quiet acknowledgement. One by one, her platoon mates made their way over to Sierra. They didn't say much. Words seemed inadequate. but their gestures spoke volumes. A hand on her shoulder, a nod of respect, an unspoken apology for the mockery she had endured. She nodded back, silently accepting it. She didn't need them to say anything. She had already proved herself in ways they could never understand. In the weeks that followed, Sierra's reputation continued to grow, not through stories or tall tales, but through actions. Her team learned, perhaps the hard way, that underestimating her was the greatest mistake they could make. As for Sierra, she remained the same. Silent, focused, deadly. She didn't need to change who she was to be respected. All she had to do was stay true to herself. Her rifle would do the rest. And for the rest of her days on that base, the quiet girl, the one who had never fought for recognition, was now regarded as a cornerstone of the unit. In the end, her silence was the loudest declaration of all.